because we're doing each feature of the face in fast forward. So we're going to be doing, I guess we'll start with the most recognizable and the most, I guess the most weighted as far as portraits go, because I'm talking about the eyes, right? They're the most recognizable features of people. So we're going to start with the eyes. We'll move on to the nose, which is the closest feature there. Helps define the face. We'll go on to the lips. That'll complete, the facial plane, and we'll work on the ears and hair afterwards. All right. So what I'm getting at is we're going to start warming up immediately. So if you remember, our warm up, right, is on our cheap paper. We'll save the good paper for the actual drawing. And we're going to start with our ovals and circles. Remember, good speed, loosen up your shoulder, light pressure, and really trying to get our points touching, right? Where we start the circle, and then when we come around, we want to finish where we started to really kind of get that eye-hand coordination, calibrated. And we'll take it from there. Okay. All right. So warming up, warming up, warming up. You know what? I'm gonna, for those people will be joining us, tell them exactly what this is. Okay. So I guess I'll do a little talking while I'm drawing, warming up. I have several examples of good, portraits, reference material, meaning like good photography that I want to show you. I'm going to also show you kind of like a case study where I found a portrait, and then I was searching on Pinterest, and it shows you pictures where it says this person, this, so and so attempted this. So it'll be, I found a interesting photograph, and it showed me right next to it maybe 4 or 5 people who attempted to draw it. And it's a great case study because it shows the importance of structure and all the things that we've been concentrating in the first sessions. And it's kind of like a warning as to this is what happens when you don't focus on structure. And I have a great source material. Most of it is not drawn by me. I mean, it's just to reiterate that there's so much good reference material out there nowadays. And there's been this huge resurgence of representational art that's drawing realism. So there's been like this really huge movement of really good artists to put out good content, and you can watch hours of free content on YouTube, right? The people who I refer to all the time are Stan Prokopenko. His YouTube page is called proko.com. Well, he has a website, but he also goes by Proko, Proko, on YouTube. He's been an outstanding, source of information. I've been referencing for years now. And he's a young guy. I believe he's younger than me, but he's been studying kind of in a atelier system since he was 16 out in San Diego. So he's been very fortunate, just due to due to geography where he was born. He just so happened that he lived down the street from a world-class artist, and he's taking full advantage of it. And so he's kind of taken that information and digitized everything, kind of brought it up to the 21st century. Another great resource is Stephen Bauman, Stephen, Stephen Bauman, Bauman. He's an incredible artist as well, and I love his aesthetic, the way he the way he creates his drawings, from the ground up, and just really nice drawings to look at. good information too. It's very well spoken, very detailed, very disciplined. And I'm constantly searching on YouTube and Pinterest. Oh man, Pinterest is like a sickness. I have, I think, over 17,000 pins. But you know, some for drawing, some for painting, some for illustration, some for digital art. I mean, it's such a wealth of information that's free. It's great.
So, hey, Sam, I have someone asking in the chat, what is an atelier situation?
What's the what situation? I'm sorry.
An atelier situation?
Atelier situation.
Atelier.
Oh,
There you go. Sorry.
Atelier,
Like, what
yeah.
is that? Fancy.
Atelier. So it's a fancy word for an art school, right? So it's an art school geared towards nothing but the arts. So atelier, I believe it's a French word. There is nothing other. There's nothing studied at this school other than art. So that's, you know, drawing, painting, sculpture, you know, classical structure. And it's not like you take the class and you get a grade and you're done. These are classes that you'll be revisiting for years and years and years, or depending on what you want to concentrate on. Right? If you're a sculptor, you'll be, you know, taking sculpture classes. If you want to study drawing, you'll be focusing on those classes. But it's kind of like it's an ongoing learning experience. You're never officially done. I mean, you could you know, actually a lot of ateliers, they actually wind up hiring instructors through their own system. So after they train you, you know, depending on how well you do or how serious you are, they often seek out their instructors through their own ranks. So so it's funny. So some ateliers will have an aesthetic that's different from other ateliers, just due to the ecosystem that they're in, right? So they are kind of rare, and I would be wary, or at least do my research before looking up an atelier, because not all ateliers are equal. You know, they might say they're an atelier just to use the fancy word, you know, to attract, you know, eyeballs. So, but yeah, it's just a very serious art school. So Stan Prokopenko, he's the product of that system. He learned from an artist named Jeffrey Watts. So the atelier, it's actually named after the artist. It's the Watts Atelier. So when I found Stan, I realized, wow, this guy's amazing. Who trained him? And then I found out it was Jeffrey Watts of the Watts Atelier. He's been teaching there for, I think, 20 plus years. You know, he was an artist in California, and he just wanted to create a place where he can train artists the way he wished he had been trained. So his father was an illustrator, commercial illustrator, and Jeff, the son, he just took over and just took it to the next level, and he really went, you know, the classical route. He's an amazing artist and painter, and the way he can manipulate it looks like he was born with it. He's really amazing. It's no wonder why his students are really, really good. Okay, so I am officially warmed up. Let's look at some reference material. So, okay, so one thing I would like you to keep in mind is this this figure that we've been studying, right? This is that rudimentary head shape that we studied early on, right? So looking forward, right? This is a head-on view. Everybody is, Sharice, is everyone seeing the 3D model? Did I share it correctly? Sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right,
Trying to find the unmute.
Okay, so when all the lines are, when the face is looking directly at us, right? You're looking directly into the viewer's face. All these lines appear parallel, and that doesn't change, right? So I'll prove it. But one of the things is we start with the circle, right, for the main mass of the cranium, and then we kind of shave off the sides, right, with our oval. But here we don't see the oval, just like a quarter. Like if you look at a quarter on its edge, it looks like a line. That's the same thing going on here, right? But once I start to change the view, right, then we can see that that plane of the face is more evident. This one is a little confusing because that blue line continues around. So when I turn it, it's still kind of there. But imagine these orange lines are not there, and all we see is I'm sorry, the blue line. Imagine the blue lines aren't there, and we only see the orange lines. That represents the side plane of the face, right? Either side. But what I want you to take note is these lines, the red lines, this represents the hairline, the brow line, not the eye line, the brow line. This line represents the base of the nose. This bottom line is the chin. These two lines represent the top and bottom lip, right? All right, so that means the edges. So the entire mouth would live in between these two lines. So this is the upper edge of the upper lip, and this is the bottom edge of the bottom lip. Now, when I tilt the head, you'll notice that all these lines still remain parallel to each other, okay? And that's very important when building structure. So no matter what portrait that you're looking at, no matter what your reference material is, one of the underlying, I guess, key points of the structure is that these lines remain parallel, okay? So no matter what direction you move it in, right? So that should be like one of those anchors, one of those pieces of information that should really be anchored into your structure. Okay, so here is an example of a drawing that kind of ignores that. There's one, and here's two. Okay, so we have the photo on the side here, on the left, and then we have an attempt. So I was wondering if maybe the angle of the portrait is a little off. So, you know, the angle of the actual picture of the portrait might be warping it somewhat. But even so, I do believe that there's a lot of structural issues going on here that should have been addressed early on. Because as you can see, no amount of color will save a badly structured drawing, if that makes sense. So I want you to look at the angles of the eyebrows, the angles of the eyes, the nose, actually the downward curves of the nostrils in particular, right? Imagine a straight line connecting the left nostril, the bottommost edge of the curve, to the bottommost edge of this curve, right? And that's where you would get your line. And then a line through the mouth, that's through the corners of the mouth here. And then the chin. Okay, you can see that those lines, they appear parallel in the photograph. If I was to connect a line through those features, they would all remain parallel. Whereas here, the angles, although they're consistent with the eyebrow and the eyes, right? So the artist decided to almost straighten out the eyebrow and the eyes, right? It doesn't compute with the angle of the face, right? So another important feature is the angle from the eyebrow to the ear. Now, it's very evident to us, we can see through the photograph that his face is tilted back, right? We can see the underlying plane of the nose, right? We can see the planes of the eye above it very well, right? And we could also see underneath the jaw. We know, you know, if we were to draw a center line, right, down the edge, down the front plane of his face, we can see that line is tilting back. But also, I want you guys to use the ear, the tip of the ear, the top, and the edge of the eyebrow, and kind of connect that line. So you can see that there's a downward angle that should be there also. That downward angle helps to orient the rest of the drawing too. So you can see on the on the painting to the right, the tip of the ear to the eyebrow, it's a much more shallow angle. It's almost flat. Whereas this one looks to be about maybe 30 degrees, right? This one is, maybe, 5, maybe 10 degrees, right? So, right, and I'm measuring that angle. If I drew a straight line going from the eyebrow to the edge here, and then I measured from here to here, right? So imagine there's like a triangle. I'm measuring that angle that would be created between that flat line and the line going from the ear to the eyebrow. So from the eyebrow of the painting, if I drew a straight line outward, and then I measured another line to the tip of the ear, that angle there, right, from that flat line to that angle to the ear would be very shallow. So that's why I say about 5 to 10 degrees, and this is, maybe 30 degrees, not quite 45, but almost. Right, so you can see the if we were to use comparative measurement, right, think horizontal and vertical lines, right? So we're moving away from the actual structure of the face to our own reference line. So if I dropped a vertical line right through the pupil of the right eye, right? If I dropped it right through there, you could see where, I'm looking for things that line up. So I know, all right, the nostril goes past this pupil, not by much. I'm also hitting the upper curve of the lip on the right side. I'm hitting the bottom curve of the bottom lip, and I'm also coming to the corner of the chin, right? So I'm trying to see all the information that lines up vertically. If I come over here, right, all of that disappears. So the pupil of the right eye and the nostril almost line up perfectly, where the nostril should be a little bit further out. The lip, it's almost there, but the lip needs to be pushed out much further. You could see how we missed the bottom lip almost entirely. And then when I get to the bottom, I'm hitting air where I should be hitting the chin. Okay. So now I'm looking for reference points. Now you can move that vertical line anywhere you want. You could do it to the outer edge of the face. So the brow and the cheekbone, right? Where that lines up. You can come to this the left eyebrow, maybe the beginning, right towards the middle of the face. I also found out the name of this. It was kind of my memory wasn't working last week, but this part of the face is called the glabella. So that area, that plane between the two eyebrows, is called the glabella. So and this edge of the eyebrow, right, where the glabella begins, if I drew a straight line going down there, here I find the nostril, here I find the corner of the mouth, and the other edge of the chin. Okay. So you just kind of want to line up things horizontally, vertically, to check your work, basically. You want to make sure that everything is located correctly. One of the easiest things to do, right, is to draw the circle, right, which is the main mass of the head, right? We want to draw the oval for that represents the side plane, right? And the oval, the edge of the oval goes to the back of the head and to the edge of the eyebrow. You can kind of see the shift in light. So this light here, right? These highlights, and then you can see the shadow of the forehead right where that edge is, right where they meet. That is where the oval lives to represent the side plane of the face. And then within that oval, right, you would put a line representing the tip of the ear, the angle of the face, basically, from the tip of the ear to the eyebrow. So that line would appear like so in that oval, right? Then we would have the jaw coming down. We would draw the center line, right? We would find the thirds, the first third, second third, and then last third, final third. And then we would draw our center line, put in our jaw, and then we can put in our parallel lines, basically kind of mapping out where our features are going to line up. Okay, and we're gonna focus more on that next week. But for this week, we're going to start looking at features of the face. So let's see. And as I'm constantly trying to manage expectations here, but your portraits don't have to be photorealistic, right? There could be a lot of expression in the drawing itself, but what I really want you to focus on is structure. I want everything where it's supposed to be. How it appears after that is really up to you. Okay, let's check out another version. All right, so this is a very delicate portrait. It's very well rendered, but it's left very expressive. There's not a lot of graphite on this paper, right? There's a little bit of white chalk or maybe white graphite highlighting some of the planes of the face and the nose and stuff. But you can see it's very loose and it's very expressive. But again, the structure is sound. Okay, here's John Singer Sargent. You can see he used an economy of line it's masterful. This guy, it's amazing what he could do with just a few lines. So you have the complete character of the person. You have the correct angle. You have this lighting here, right? Normally we like to offset the face with the dark feature. So I've seen a lot of portraits. If the face is very well lit, sometimes this scratchy kind of this scrolling shading in the back behind the head also appears in the front, just so that the face appears to have more contrast. But I believe this is also on tinted paper. It might be gray paper. It might not. It might be white paper too. I'm not sure. But you can see that although our portrait is very loose and expressive, it's very well structured and appealing. Right. And here's Al Pacino, of course. Right. So how you choose to render the portrait is really where we part ways. I'm going to get you to the structure, and then how you complete that drawing, that's another adventure for you to take, right? And you can take it however which way you want. And that's basically how style is discovered. You can't choose a style. The style kind of chooses you, right? And then I have there's some more drawings. So you can see how the right side of the face, although it is spaced out correctly, it's it's completely without detail. All right, and the main focus is here. The focal point would be right in the face. Here, this is the Nikolai Fechin. So a huge economy of line as far as rendering. Same here. It's all about structure, getting everything parallel to one another and being consistent with the lines. I guess this will be more discussed more with shading and rendering, but you can see how it's the alternating lights and darks, right? Can help describe the planes of the face, right? Where the light is hitting. So underneath the nose is shadow, top of the lip is light, and it depends where the light source is. So think of a light source coming from the top to down above you. Like if you're in your house, your lights are in the ceiling, they're above you, right? Upper lip shaded, bottom lip is lit, and so on and so forth. So I think I have another example in the lips area. So these are a couple of portraits that I wanted to kind of explore and to discuss quality of reference, right? So this is, if you're measuring pixels, I think this is like 1,500 pixels by almost 2,000 pixels. So I can zoom in quite a bit. Let me see. Right, and I don't lose a lot of detail. Now, if you did this to some other photos, like say if it was 200 by 300 pixels, this would be completely blurry. So you be careful which reference materials you use. Make sure it's a high quality res. You can even, if you're looking for pictures online, if you're Googling, I would always put like high res, RES for resolution. Let's see. Captain Picard. I love Star Trek, so. And this, I also chose this face because you can see the planes of the face. Although he has somewhat of an unusually shaped head, his forehead is sloped further back. It's very characteristic of him. Right? It's one of those main, those features that really make them stand out. But you could see how the planes of the face and how the skin conforms to the skull, right? That's why it's always a good idea. You can almost really see his entire socket for his skull, right? And you can see it, played out here in the flesh. And here's that ear to eyebrow line that you could focus on, right? It's usually slanted slightly upwards. Okay, so Robert Downey Jr., look at the tip of his ear to his eyebrow. You see how it's almost flat? This would denote that his head is slightly tilted downward, right? So if it's a flat angle or the angle is pointing downward, you know that the head is tilting downward, right? So all your proportions will start to, comply to that. You also, it's very hard to see underneath his nose. That's another telling sign. When you can't see the underlying plane of the nose, usually the head is tilting downward some. And we studied these last week. This is shading again. These are principles that we'll come back to next week. Oh, here's another example of that flat line. So it seems like she's tilting her head slightly downward. And here is an example of if we were to line up the eyebrows, eyes, nose, mouth, and chin, you can see how everything is tilting. They should be tilting, from left to right in a downward angle, right? And those angles, you want to make sure that you have those consistent to one another. And again, these are fairly high res photos where I can zoom in if I need to. So think of like if you're looking for a picture and you hover over it. Let's see if we can do a quick search. So high res portrait. So if we go to images, and when you hover over it, usually, I guess not always, if you click on the photo and you hover it over here, there's the number that appears in the lower corner. So this is 626 by 487, which is not bad, but you can't zoom in, you're not going to see like the pores of his face. All right, let's see if we find another example. Let's see this a little bit. All right, so this is amazing. This is 4800 by 7200. So if I was to click, open this in a new tab. Right. Actually, I'm going to save this image. And show the folder. No, I think, of course, the one example I want to show. Yeah, I don't know why it says. Oh, that's why this is being sold. All right, so it's advertised as 4800 by, whatever it was, 7,000. But this is a thumbnail of that picture. You would actually have to buy this reference. So of course we're looking for, free high res images. So, let's see. Why is this being so difficult? All right. All right, so let's see if we can click on another one. It says 1280 by 1900 image. All right, so here you can see where I'm zooming around, I could see a lot of visual detail. So this would be a great photo to download if I'm really focused on detail and just high res, lots of information that I can see. Right. So if it's in the thousands, then you're you should be safe. In the low hundreds, not a good photo. All right. So going back to structure, let's see. All right. So facial features. Okay, so eyes. So eyes are extremely interesting, just due to their uniqueness, right? So why are they unique? Well, they're the only body part that has this clear lens on top, right? There's no other part of the body that has like a clear lens on top here. So I wanted to get some good source material here to show you that if you look at this eyeball, just like with the 3D the 3D model where the side of the head is kind of sheared off, think of the eye also like that, where this part of the eye is completely clear and the iris is a colored disc, right? That's flat and it's covered by a clear lens, right? Why is that important? Well, there's another image. So you have this clear lens over here and the iris is almost flat, right? So that changes how it's drawn in perspective, right? So what that does is it kind of changes the angle at which the iris is lit and also the pupil, the shape of the pupil. So when the eye is looking directly at you, everything is perfectly circular. But as the eyeball moves in its socket, the iris appears more like an oval, okay? So one of the biggest mistakes when people are drawing eyes is when they're turning the eyeballs, they're continuing to draw a round pupil, and that really throws off the believability, right, of the eye. So just remember that when you turn the eye in the socket, here's a good example right here. So it's just the iris by itself. You can see that when you turn it, it becomes very oval, right? And then you would have this clear lens on top, and that catches the highlight just slightly different than if the iris was, part of the surface of the eye and not actually like a cutout. I guess we'll have to do some drawing to really explore that further. Let's see, this was just an example that I had done another time. So things that we want to remember is the three-dimensionality of the eye. So I think this does a pretty good job of simplifying everything, right? We have the eyelids, right? We have the socket that's dictated by the arch of the, I think it's called the zygomatic arch of the skull, right? So that's the bone around the socket. Then you have the fleshy part that wraps around it. The eyelid that appears around the eyeball has a thickness above and below for each eyelid, right? The upper eyelid, that plane is usually obscured by the eyelashes, right? So we often see the bottom, or the lower eyelid kind of appears to us because the eyelid is bending down away from us, whereas the upper eyelid, although we should see the eyelashes do a pretty good job of covering it up. So here's a beautiful example of what to consider when doing the eyeball. So here you could see that ledge of the lower eyelid very clearly. You could see this one almost twice as clearly as the upper one, right? So when looking at the eyelid, a simple way to look at it is the upper eyelid is broken into three planes, right? We have the left, the middle, and the right plane. Whereas the lower eyelid can be kind of simplified into two planes. We have the left plane and then the right plane. It's not quite as defined as the upper eyelid. And that's partially because the iris and the cornea pushes, right? It's slightly bulged out of the eyeball. It pushes more on the eyelid. So this plane can move, it shifts depending on where the iris is. So if the iris is on the right side, this plane, this front facing plane can shift to over here where the iris would be, right? So that's something important to remember. So here's another simplified version where we see that bottom lid. Okay. Right there, again, we see it, that bottom lid. And here in you can see how when elderly people, they tend to lose a lot of the cushioning or fat in their face. It starts to thin out, and you can see much more defined features, where you can really see the three-dimensionality of the upper eyelid. So this is one of those things it's an important detail for a really, finely done portrait. And all right, so let's do a little bit of drawing. We're going to look at this drawing here. Okay, and I realized that whenever we're learning to draw one eye or draw the eyes, people usually only teach one eyeball, but we have two eyeballs. So one thing that we should do, we might not have time to do it here, is consider both eyeballs at the same time. So let's see, where am I? Okay. So, put a couple pieces of paper. So what do I mean by that? So when we're looking at the shape of the face, right? If we're looking at a portrait, we have this plane, right? The edge of the sockets. And then, okay, this would be like the lower part of the socket, right? We would have the bridge of the nose, kind of creating some space. And then we have the eye living somewhere in there. So with spacing of the eyes, the eyeball, right, the space in between the eye, the eyeball, and the outside of the eye, they should be equidistant, right? So it should be more or less 5 eyes, width. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a very, rudimentary way of spacing out the eyes. So if your eyes are huge, right, and there's only a little bit of space for the outside of the face, or your eyes appear, or if you can fit more than one eye in between, you kind of have to work on your spacing there, right? And the eyes, the eyelids, will, remember I said that we had these kind of like 3 simple planes, right? So maybe I did that a little too quick, right? So I do want you guys to kind of try this out. I'll do it again for one eye, after I show this this little demonstration. So when practicing, right, try drawing both sides simultaneously, just so that you're not practicing only one eye by itself. So you can see how this simple layout plan kind of works pretty rapidly. And the iris is usually, it's never present fully, unless somebody is very surprised. The upper eyelid usually hides some of the iris, or it depends on which way the person is looking, right? So if you have an iris that appears, you have an iris that appears like this, right? They're usually looking down. If you have an iris that looks more like that, they're looking up. This is, maybe I should add the pupils. Okay, so looking left, right, up and down, right? But for a neutral photo or a neutral position, the pupils pretty much face forward. Now, I remember someone that a friend of mine created a portrait where everything looked like it was fairly okay, right? Everything was placed in. It was actually a very well done portrait, but just the pupils, and you didn't see the pupils were kind of off to the side slightly. Now I want you to see that looks a little off, right? So the pupils, when they're not properly centered, it can throw off everything else, even though that the iris appears in the correct place, right? Something as small as the pupil not placed, in the center can really throw off, the way the portrait looks, right? Because when you're engaged with something, your two eyes, right, in order to correctly see something, they have to be slightly turned inward, right, to look at something in front of you. I mean, this is an extreme angle, but the eyeballs, they do turn slightly inward. They use the information. This is like camera one, camera two, and they're looking at from two different directions. If you're looking at a singular object, right? But we can only look at one thing at one time. It's not like a chameleon where your eyes move independently, right? So your pupils can either appear dead center or slightly turned inward, and it'll still read okay. All right, so it'll look like the eyes appear more engaged with the viewer, right? Another funny thing with the eyes is that the iris, remember I said, is like well, if I have a circle and then kind of an oval, right? Well, this is a flat angle. So just like the structure of the head. So the pupil appears as an oval as well. It's lit kind of like a disc. So I'll show you here. So when the light is hitting the opposite side, when the light comes through, it hits here, there's a shadow here. So even though there's light here on the top, right? If I'm shading a disc, the light is hitting here, but it's shadow up here. So you have light, shadow, light again, and then shadow on the underside, right? So this would be light. The top of the iris is in shadow. The bottom of the iris would be in the light. And then underneath the eyeball would be shadow. So it's kind of like this, that's that weird phenomenon of the iris, that it's shaped, it's kind of shaded like a concave bowl, right? And then the highlights, right? So imagine you have this clear lens on top. The highlight wraps around the clear glass-like cornea, right? So the highlight would follow the shape of the cornea and not necessarily the shape of the iris. So you got two opposing things here. You got a flat surface covered by a clear surface. The light is shining through, shading the iris differently, and the highlight is shading the glass dome of the cornea differently. So the highlight follows the cornea, but the general light shines through and colors the iris like a concave bowl. Okay. So for like really detailed drawings, if you're really going to focus on the eye, that's a really important detail to kind of remember. And I know this, I realize this is going to like fast forward. Okay, so let's try to draw an eye together. Let's share my screen. Hold on one sec. Okay. Hmm. No, all right, I think I'm sharing my screen and I'm enlarging. Oh, that's as big as it gets. Okay. Okay, so what this drawing shows is that it's taken into consideration the entire shape of the eye. So you have the ridge of the nose, okay? You have the upper contour line of the eyebrow leading to the arch of the like the zygomatic arch, so that's the arch of the skull, right? And it's taken into consideration the bottom plane underneath that edge, and then it takes into consideration the contour line of the bottom edge of the lower eyelid, and then it completes this side plane here. All right, so we're going to attempt to do the same thing. I want you to draw fairly large also. I really want you to focus on the eye. Don't try to draw it, do an eye the size of your thumb, because you're going to be hard pressed to put in the detail. And also the larger it is, the more real estate that you have to really focus on the detail. So what I want you to focus on is drawing, and we're going to just take it from this angle and we're going to work clockwise around this shape. We're going to try to create this shape. We might be able to make a shortcut out of this also. So I have the inner edge of the bridge of the nose. So it's about maybe 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches long, this line here. Okay. And comparative measurement, if I look at the height of this line and I bring it over here, it's pretty comparable to this line. So however long you make this, if you make this 2 inches, we're going to make this line up here just about 2 inches also. Right? So think loose. So when you're drawing with your hand, don't draw with just your wrist. I'm using my whole arm to slide the pencil. Now I'm going to do a kind of almost like a there's 2 edges to this section here. It appears like it's one curve, but if you want to break it up into 1, 2, you can do that as well. Okay, and you can tell I'm stopping wherever I drew this point. I'm stopping just about in that region also. Okay, so don't continue your line down here. Don't stop it too short up top. All right, I'm always comparing, side to side, up and down, where my drawings are. Now to do that bottom plane, I can connect them with a construction line like this. Okay, so it's just going straight across. And again, I'm sliding my hand straight across. And I'm going to draw just about dead center. I'm going to draw that curve. And this represents the lower eyelid. Okay, we're going to complete the shape of the inside of the eye with a few lines. So if we look over here on the drawing, we're going to put in 3 lines. So that's 1 here, 2 representing the top of the eyelid and downwards. Keep in mind the angles. So this is a shallow angle going up. This is a shallow angle coming down. And this is a shallow angle. This is a kind of almost like a vertical line, but it goes slightly to the left, right? I'm saying inward, meaning the bridge of the nose is in. Away from the nose is out. In is towards the nose. So this line goes in. You can see these lines, they're almost parallel. Okay, so let's do that. So one line going up, another line gently sweeping to the right, another line coming inwards, almost parallel to that line there, right? I think the lower eyelid is also refined somewhat. So you can see it changes from this round shape to one angle here and another angle here. And both of these segments, this one is shorter and this one is longer. Okay, so we're going to slightly change the angle of those two. So your eraser is your best friend. Okay. All right, so we already have our line kind of bisecting this. So we'll say that above this line, this is where the upper eyelid will go, and the bottom section represents the bottom eyelid. So this is going to be tricky to describe, but we're going to be describing this upper eyelid line right here. Okay. Or, you know, to make it easier, we could actually draw the line representing the top of the eyeball that we see. Okay, so it's just where the eyelid ends, right? It's not actually the top of the eyeball, because remember, the eyeball is this big circle inside the socket. So the top of the eyeball is actually way up here. But for the iris and the eye, what we describe as the eye here, this line here that describes the top of the eyeball, let's try that one first. So it's fairly round. It's like a rounded trapezoid. So a trapezoid is just a four-sided figure like this, right? So if we just slightly round out those edges, we have a rounded kind of trapezoid. Okay, let me zoom in also. Right, so we have that rounded trapezoid. So we'll describe the top like that. And just like the eyelid below it, we have a shorter line here and a longer line there. Okay, so now it'll be easier to describe that upper eyelid line. So we're going to come over here to the inside of the eye. We're going to draw a line following the contour of the eyeball. Okay. And we can describe another line underneath the eye. We can make this a little bit more prominent, because remember, this is the one that shows up more. Okay. Oh, and judging by the drawing, this line here that we made, it looks like it was further refined, and this angle is turned inward. So going from the outside of the eye, it looks like it comes in more at this shape here, something like that. All right, so I'm double checking between the drawing and my progress, and I'll make my course correction and keep it moving. So we can add the eyebrow as well. So I'm doing a very shallow curve coming from the edge of the nose, right, the glabella. Kind of rounding out these shapes a little bit, and then following the arch. So this is where practicing all those curves and ovals really comes into play, right? So now that your arm should be acquainted with those shapes, when you need them, they should happen very naturally. Okay, and then I'm going to draw in the iris. So if you want, you could draw the complete iris, right? The circle. Actually, that looks very small. So if I look at the distance between the bottom of the iris and the eye, it's a lot. There's too much room here. Now it looks like the person's looking up. If I want them to look just left, this is not the way to go. All right, so let's do that a little bit more consciously. There you go. Okay. So for the iris, you can see the majority of the bottom of the iris. You should see it just touching the lower eyelid. But remember, the upper eyelid tends to cover the iris on top. And I can draw my pupil. I'm drawing it slightly oval. It's like elliptical, slightly elliptical, right? So it's not a perfect circle. We're not doing it round, because remember the eyeball is pointing that way. So the pupil has to kind of obey those laws. So we're not looking at a round eye pupil. It should be more like an oval, right? So whenever you draw something that's round but flat, that has flat surface, when you turn it on the side, it appears oval, and this is the shape of the iris, right? And then the cornea gives it that three-dimensionality. Okay.
Are we supposed to watch you draw it? Because it was just on the screen share. We didn't see you draw anything.
You didn't see me draw anything? Oh
No, you have to take screen share off.
Oh man.
I'm seeing him draw it. I don't know why you guys aren't. I'm seeing all of it.
Excuse me, I'm seeing everything. You can switch views.
Yeah, I made a little screen next to the drawing, so I was hoping
Oh,
you guys
look
would
at
see
that. That's just me.
that. Oh my God, I just had like a mini heart attack.
I'm sorry. Thanks, guys. I had it on full screen the whole time. I'm like, what is he talking about? Okay, thanks.
All right, cool. Disaster averted. All right, so the next phase would be a shading phase, right? So when you want to start creating lights and darks, you want to create everything in one shade of gray. Okay, so let's take our time. Let's just observe the drawing here. I'm looking at this panel, right, the lower left, right? And you're going to shade in everything that appears in shadow. You're going to unify it into one shadow kind of shape. All right, and this is a good, so you can see that this underlying shape, we're creating that. There's shadow here. Okay, the upper eyelid. Lower eyelid. And shading these different planes takes practice, lots of observation. Like I said, your reference material will largely dictate, what you'll be shading. So right now, this is kind of like we're doing a drawing of a drawing. So it's kind of like an abstraction of an abstraction. Once you have your source material, it'll be a lot more informationally dense. So what I want you to do is use this exercise to really, figure out what's really going on, so that when you are presented, when you take on the portrait by yourself, you're able to kind of have like a way of processing all that information. So, again, here we go, the three planes I was talking to you. So the upper eyelid. So think of like there's a line here and here, right? So this is one plane. This would be the second plane, and this is the third plane. You don't have to draw this on yours. This is just something to keep in mind. And the lower eyelid is kind of broken down into these two planes. So upper eyelid, think 3 planes, lower eyelid, think 2 planes, and that'll help you pick where your lights and darks will go. Okay. And then as you progress through the drawing, it's just a matter of finding your darkest darks, right, and your highlights. Okay, so you have your highlights and then your dark accents. So if you want to look at the progression, I want to keep on moving So look at where the eyelid and the kind of like the skull meet, right? That bony structure. You have that deep recess, so there's a hard shadow. So it would come off the eyelid like so. Okay. You have the addition of, eyelashes, which greatly darken the upper eyelid, but also you have a cast shadow of the eyelid. Since there is three-dimensionality to the upper eyelid, it's actually, light is actually being diminished or blocked. And on the upper eyelid, there's a shadow cast on the eyeball. Okay, so that's one more detail that a lot of times it's left out, or it's not addressed fully, and it kind of leaves, rendering a little flat. So it's just another an addition to make your eyeball pop. The eyeball is never really pure white. If you find a photo where the whites of the eyes appear pure, it was probably touched up by a photographer, right, to really emphasize whoever they're taking a picture of, right? You can see the eyebrows, right? The angle of the hairs of the eyebrows usually start almost vertical towards the center, right, of the, where the glabella is. These eyelids, these eyebrow hairs are almost vertical, and as they go towards the outer curve, they start to lay downward, and then they take on the shape of the curve. So, right, so we have vertical, and then they start to lay down and then take the shape. So it really, you have to pay attention to how the hairs are growing inside the, for the person. So it comes down to observation, right? Because some ladies who maybe pluck their eyebrows, maybe you won't see so, thick, right? So they might take on the shape a little bit sooner, right? Whereas me, I have very, bushy eyebrows, so my hairs are, very dense, and they kind of grow from two angles. I have hairs coming up and hairs coming from the top, and they're kind of, forming kind of like this. They're coming at two different angles, growing from the top down and from the bottom up, and they come to a point at the end. Yeah. So that's the basic structure of the eye. So we have, simple, trapezoidal shapes. We have the three planes of the upper eyelid. We have the eyelids themselves having three-dimensionality. Don't forget that. And then we have like the phenomena of the iris, where it's kind of lit in reverse of what the eyeball is. So if the light is on top of the eyeball, the top of the iris is usually dark and the bottom is lit, and the shadow of the eye down here is basically reversed. It's like the inverse. That's what I meant to say. It's the inverse. Okay. And that's that. So if and I would always recommend drawing two eyes at the same time, practicing, a page of just one single eyeball. I mean, you could do it, but I'm just saying that you would probably be better off overall with studying both simultaneously, right? So good quality reference material. All right, let's move on. Let's see. Oof. So we have the nose, which is another tough one.
That was good, Sam. I have an eye.
Awesome. All right. So the planes, wow. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm just going to discuss the nose very quickly because we're running out of time. I mean, this class, it amazes me how fast it goes. Wait, stop sharing screen. And oh, I can't share individual. Oh, wait, yes, I can. Okay. So we have the structures of the nose, right? So we have the bony section on the top, right? And then we have the tip of the nose is almost pure cartilage. Well, it is pure cartilage and skin. There's a lot of planes of the nose. I mean, this is also it depends on the person, right? So the tip of my nose is very round. I don't really have these sharp planes of the nose, but this is just amazing source material. I felt like I needed to add it. So first we see the simplified version, right? So we have a top plane, a thin rectangular plane. We have a curved plane underneath, and then a rectangular plane of the side of the face, right? So we can add more detail by including other planes of the face. Think of like you're taking, you know, a ball of clay or a chunk of cheese, and you're slicing kind of different planes off of that, and you're creating all the other different facets of the nose, right? So these two are very exaggerated, where in reality it looks a lot smoother, right? So at first we want to study something that's a little bit more exaggerated, and then we'll work on refining later. So here is another view of the different kind of nose types. You can see how it all kind of extends from what kind of cartilage you have underneath your skin. Okay. Here's something a little bit more detailed. You can see the fatty deposits around the nostril. But where's the tip? Let me see if I have better planes. This was a good example. Like this little sliver here, right? You can see it's just indicated. It's so soft because skin has so many unique properties in itself. Skin is translucent, so light kind of passes through it, and you'll never see a hard edge on a person's nose like this. It'll look more diffused. It'll look very soft, but the plane of the nose, it's clearly there. You can see that little shadow indicating to that little plane, but it's very soft. There's a lot of blending in between. And here's a more simplified. It's less refined, I felt like, but I also want to present to you like how it could be simplified and approached more simply, where we have our kind of like our triangular prism. You add the circles to represent the curves, right? And then you kind of add details slowly. You change the contour of the line, right? I feel like this is a good way to get structure quickly on a simple figure like our Loomis head. And then you can add, you know, detail. You could build it up. But I kind of, let's see. Jackman. This is an interesting example. So this is more like an animation style. This is like attempting, you know, realism with the nostrils and stuff. But what's happening is whenever the nose turns, it's a change in form. Like this, the tip of the nose is obscuring the nostril on the other side. So sometimes we tend to force perspective and we include more of the nostril than is actually seen, right? And that's just our brains telling us, like, I know there's another nostril, I should be seeing it, but sometimes we ignore what we're actually seeing and we draw what we think is there. So this is just something to be, you know, aware of. This goes into more like faceting the nose, changing it into different planes. Where is it? So the first step I wanted to do was this one. Okay, so it's formulating, or you know, forming the glabella, the top plane, the side planes, and then the bottom plane of the nose. All right, so share screen. Okay. All right. So again, I don't want you guys drawing too small. My camera, okay. So, you know, if this is the size of my hand, my drawing will roughly be about the size of my hand, okay? So we have the curve of the brow, okay? We have the formation of the glabella, which is just a kind of like a trapezoid. I would make the right side, since we're copying the drawing that's on the screen, the right side of the glabella should appear longer than the other side, just slightly. Okay, and then we close that off. The next thing I want you to do is draw kind of a parallelogram without any curves. All right, we'll add the curves in a little bit. Then remember from the eye exercise, we kind of have like the socket kind of going off to the right here, and the socket going off to the left, like so. So following this shape up here, right, we're going to do something similar down here. So remember, since it's turning in space, if you look at the left nostril, right, or the left edge of the nostril, you can see how short this is compared to how long this is, right? So comparative measurement. The left side, right, will appear smaller than the right side. That's how you're going to keep in check your sides, your planes of the nose. So this side is going to be thinner. This side will be wider. Right, so these edges almost match up down below. And I'm going to close it up something like that. Okay, so now that we have the rough planes, okay, I can change the contour of the upper plane. Right, so always think, you know, simple to complex, simple to complex. All right, I'm going to go to the next drawing. Okay, so now here, one of the defining features is the lower plane, right? So we can see the ball of the nose and also the septum, and how one nostril is being obscured by the septum. So from this corner here, we're going to draw a kind of like a curved line. So if you imagine a center line to the nose, it should appear something like that. Right, just to help us center our lines a little bit. If we look at the nostrils themselves, you can see how this is kind of like half an egg almost, whereas this nostril appears more like an apostrophe. So part of like kind of like translating ideas into, you know, actually actions, you kind of want to like make a lot of associations with shapes, right? So this, the right nostril kind of looks like it's an apostrophe laying down on its side. So I'm going to draw an apostrophe laying down on its side. And I'm going to draw half an egg on the other side. All right, so I'm going to try to keep the tops of the nostrils somewhat on the same construction line. All right, and as far as the nostril, I'm just going to have to play with it until I feel like it looks right. So if I'm just going to gently cover it, because contrast kind of will help us in judging whether or not it's in the right spot. All right, so whenever you're drawing, you know, noses, try to make, or anything really, whenever you're trying to draw something, you're trying to make it make sense in your head. Like, how can I translate this, or what does this look like? That'll help you, you know, translate something that's very complex into, you know, simple tidbits that your brain can really, you know, digest. Right, so you can see how the nose is being broken up into its cartilage, I guess, sections, right? So we have a nostril. So I'm drawing half an oval for this side of the nostril. This other nostril is kind of angled in towards the bridge of the nose. Okay, we have our halfway point. We have kind of our lighting angles. So, oh, for the bridge of the nose, just to show that there's another plane here, I drew a curve coming down. So that line going across shows where there's a break in the plane of the nose. So we have the top plane, right? So imagine there's almost like a little plate here, and this plate faces upwards. Whereas this little plate, right, it looks like an inverted trapezoid again, right? It's facing pretty much directly outwards. So imagine the tip of your nose and it's, right, there's a sharp edge here, and we just chop that sharp edge, and it makes this kind of a beveled tip. Have the underlying shape that I showed which was that little kind of angle that was put in between here. Uh-oh. It says my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear and see me?
Yeah, you froze there for a second, but you're still good right now.
Okay, cool. So I'm adding in kind of like this change in plane line, right? I'm refining this. So I'm adding it to the side of the nostril, underneath the nostril. I'm keeping in mind that little triangular plane here for the side of the nose. We're not going to see it on this side, but this side of the edge of the nose is in shadow already, right? So if we start to color it in, right, the underlying plane of the nose, we get something like this. Right, so I'm going to color in the nostrils a little bit more. I'm going to kind of commit to that. I'm going to erase just a little bit of what's going on here to make it look like it's making more sense. Right, and you can kind of see where we can draw in other planes, like the planes of the eyeball that, you know, kind of flesh their way out. Right? So I think that was like a simple way. If we move at to the next level, it's just more contouring, right? It's just paying attention to the different planes of the face, adding in more detail, right? So now they're adding a little bit more of this plane here, which is a lot more subtle. We don't have these obvious lines around the nostril when we're shifting from this plane to the side of the nose or on top of the nose. So it's taking into consideration things like, so things like the structure of this nose down here, where we see all the different facets. It's keeping this in mind, but realizing that we can't see the lines of that. It's just done tonally. It's only done with lights and darks, right? If you try to, you know, delineate every single plane, your person's going to look like, you know, like they're made out of metal or something, or, you know, out of plastic. So just think,
like Max Headroom.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What was that?
He'll look like Max Headroom, if anybody knows who that is.
Max Headroom. Was that the like he used to do the Coca-Cola commercials in the 80s and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Right, so let's check out the lips. I think we're almost out of time, but as I was hoping to do the eyes and nose at least. So if we look at we did the nose. We're gonna look at the lips. All right, share my screen one more time. Okay. All right, lips. Okay, so the lips, let's find something a little more structural. this is, I think I found this from a lip injection site. So they were showing you where they place like their lip injections, I think. But it made for a really good photo reference, right? So think of the lips as pillows. So your upper lip is 3 pillows, and your bottom lip is 2 larger pillows. So you have 3 small pillows up top and 3 medium-sized pillows on the bottom. All right, and it's kind of like the eyelid too. You had 3 planes of the eyelid above and 2 planes, you know, for the lower eyelid. Okay, it's too detailed. Okay, let's see. Oh, here's another example, right? So 3 sections, 3 main sections. And this is how they're lit according to, you know, an above the head light source, right? So you have your nose, you have, you know, light, dark underneath the nose, light upper lip, dark, you know, dark for the under plane of the lip, light for the top plane of the bottom lip, dark underneath the lip, top of the chin is light, and underneath the chin going towards the, you know, the jaw and neck is dark. But you can see those 3 pillow areas. You have your center pillow, right? So the angles are kind of like mirror each other. So you have this split in the middle of the lip, and where it touches the bottom lip, it also mirrors that. Then we have our left and right plane, which are mirror images of that. Right, and just keep in mind that there's always 3-dimensionality to this. There's the teeth are round or appear round in the skull, meaning they kind of wrap around. Think of like a hockey puck. I think I have a image that shows that. Yeah, so you want to think of the roundness of the face left to right and the roundness of the face going top to bottom. Okay, so the teeth follow this round vertically, and they follow it horizontally. Okay, so that's important when drawing the lips from an angle, because your mouth, you know, conforms to those 3-dimensional underlying shapes, right? So we have the roundness of the teeth vertically. I'm repeating myself. Okay, I think you guys get it. So the when you're drawing the mouth in perspective, it has to follow the 3-dimensionality of the skull. Okay. Here's another version of the lighting. So the sun above these lips here show why the upper lip would be in shadow. And if the light source was even with the face, you can see how it splits the face into 2. So you have the left side lit, the right side in shadow. And then you have an underlit face. Think of like a candle on a table, and maybe somebody standing up, and now the light would appear, you know, reversed from if you were outside and the sun was up in the sky. Okay, so there's always this alternating pattern of light, depending where the light source is. But there's also this step-like rhythm of the face, starting from the nose. So you have the bridge of the nose. I think that was my last picture. You have the step of the nose or the brow. Look, even from the forehead. So the brow to the bridge of the nose, out to the tip, into the top of the lip. And then you have, you know, keep on down that stair-like pattern. If you keep that simple rhythm in mind, then you'll know how to light these different planes, like which one's going to be in shadow and which one's going to be in light. Okay, and here's a more realistic version of it. So you can see how the upper lip, right, it's also curved. So there's an underlying shadow towards where the upper lip meets the bottom lip, right, since it's angled outwards. Right, so you'll have a little bit of light touching the top of the lip where it comes into contact with your skin, and you can see how it recedes into shadow towards the edges of the mouth, right? And then the upper lip, the bottom lip receives the majority of the light, where a lot of the time you have those really bright highlights, like if you're wearing very shiny, if women are wearing shiny lip gloss, or you know, anybody's wearing chapstick, your lips appear a little bit more shiny, will have much more highlight on the bottom lip. I think at the corner of the mouth, this is where people get very
caught up because you have all these underlying muscles creating this pillow-like shape at the edge of the mouth. But it's very subtle. When the skin is covering this, it's a very subtle transition, especially if the person's face is fleshy. So if they have big puffy cheeks, you don't always see this pillow. But if somebody has a low body fat percentage, you can tend to see these, these interrelationships a lot better. But it's very subtle. Like here's the bottom of that pillowing effect. So the corner of the mouth, there would be, all these muscles meeting at the corner of the mouth, creating this bump here, and all that's, indicating that would be the shadow underneath the bump. You don't actually see the contour of the muscles. So I think I'm out of time. If I guess we can attempt these lips here.
You got like 3 to 5 minutes. You're good.
Yeah, I know. So let's just let's tackle that for a second. And all right. So, as far as studying the structure, we could start at the top of the lip in just a general curve like this, right? Keeping in mind that the corners of the mouth will be parallel to each other. This is all dependent upon, the person having a neutral expression. If they're smiling or smirking, the mouth might stretch into different orientations, right? Maybe add a curve for the mouth too. Yeah, so the middle of the face, or the middle of the lip, I should say, contoured like so, right? We have that center pillow. And we have those side pillows. Okay, and our bottom lip. So these fatty deposits, this is kind of like where we have that split in our lip. And then when you unify these shapes, you get the basic structure for the lip. Right, so these areas over here, they pinch. So if I was to draw contour lines, well, that's not too dark. So they kind of angle inwards and downwards, right? So this is where you get the majority of your shadow. Okay, you have a little bit of shadow underneath here of the center pillow, but the top part of the pillow, that pillow in the middle, does receive some light, and it does, trickle, towards the adjacent pillows on the side, something like that. And then for the bottom lip, if the person has full lips, the majority of that lip is in the light because the angle is coming outwards, down and outwards. And so your transition of light would be a lot more subtle in here, where we would have the highlight kind of towards the middle, the center portion of the lip, and closer to the center of the mouth. As you come away, that plane, right? This is a round shape. It's a three-dimensional shape. There's a fall off of light, and towards the edge of the lip, it becomes darker over here. Some people have a slightly pronounced split in their lip. You might want to add that.
So like I said, I keep returning back to the resource, your source material, right? What are you using to draw? All right. For the corners of the mouth, you could draw just like this indication of shadow. So it's like, think of like a deflated balloon, right? Before you blow up a balloon, it kind of looks like this. Right? So you have these kind of shapes towards the edge of the mouth to indicate like there's a fold of skin there. And then the pillowing of the lips, right? So you would have these kind of like bunches of muscles kind of meeting in the corner of this area and indicating a very soft amount of shadow. This is where practice and observation really come into play, right? You can get like a small amount of pillowing in those areas. Try to get rid of those lines. Right, so next week we're going to try to put it all together. I know we left out the ear, but for the ear, I feel like it's not one of the main things we need to really discuss. But I was going to discuss like this hook, this outer hook here, and this kind of chubby Y shape, right? So this would be the ear canal, the beginning of the ear canal. Right, so depending on who you're looking at, what shape their ear is, if it's a small ear or large ear, connected lobes, this is a disconnected lobe. My ear lobes actually connect, right? So it depends on who you're looking at. So this is a front view, you're looking at the person, this is a side view, profile, and then this is a rear view. Right? It's a somewhat simple construction. I feel like for a portrait, it's not, crucial to make the portrait because, some people you can't even see their ears. Like say you're doing a portrait and they're wearing a hood or they have long hair or they're wearing a hat, an ear won't make or break it. But as far as it's important to learn the structure because it is part of the head. So here's the basic construction. You have your outside shape. So like I said before, it kind of looks like a question mark, or the outer actual shape looks like a question mark or like an upside down hook. And then you have this like chubby Y in here. And then for the, I think it's called the tragus, I saw on the other example, is like this little triangular shape here, right? An important thing to really describe the ear is this contour line. If you could see where the shadow and light are separated, look how the shadow line follows the contour of the ear, right? The structure of the ear is not lost. Even though this is a very simply shaded drawing, you can see how that contour, it follows throughout the entire ear, right? Anytime you flatten out those lines, you are flattening out the shape, right? The ear is really weird. It has all these twists and turns and ins and outs. If you straighten any of those shadow lines, you're going to get a flat ear. And that goes for anything. If you have, anytime you take a shadow, whoa, that was weird. Anytime you take a shadow line and you make it flat, you are flattening out the shape. That's an important distinction. All right. And then hair.
So
Hair is what's up?
No, I was gonna say it's like 7:05. So I mean, you could do a little brief, but we should.
Yeah, just real quick. So hair we can break into blocks of shapes like this, and then you add detail to it little by little. You'll be adding, erasing, depending on what kind of hair type you're doing. But hair is literally just trying to find the simplest shape that you can, create the shape, find how the light is hitting it, where's the shadows, where's the lights, and then you add detail. You're adding texture, down the road. And that's it. All right, so like I said, we'll try to
we'll try to tackle a full portrait next week.
Thanks, Sam.
No problem.
Thanks, Sam.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Everybody. Awesome. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you.
I want you guys to find source material, practice. It will make next week a lot easier to pull off. I know
Okay, guys.
portraiture is not, it's not an easy thing to do.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks for joining. Oh, that was fancy.
Bye.
Whoa, zoom out effect.
Yeah, let's try that one more time. Ooh. Have a good night.